Howdy ESSM 406. In the previous lecture, I explained that we were going to be using this model that comes from economics that views the justifications for public policy as coming from imperfections in the market. It's important that you begin by understanding what we mean by a market. I think there's a lot of confusion about this. In the next unit, I'll probably talk to you about confusion about what we mean by the term government, but here I'm going to talk about markets. There's a tendency to view, particularly in modern culture where we're so engaged in the market, we're so involved in the market, to view markets as kind of something that exists naturally and that is independent of government, independent of, it's a form of collective decision making, right? We all decide what we're going to buy, but it's just very free. And this is an ideology actually that we've adopted in our society. And it's true to some extent. But it's also important that you understand some of the limitations of this idea. In particular, markets are creations. They don't exist naturally. Think about a state of nature. You can't buy an iPhone when you're out in the woods, right? There has to be a store. There has to be a set of property rights that decides who has access to buy this. I could hit you on the head and steal that from you, right? But I don't. People in our society, there isn't that much crime where people steal things. So all of this is the result of a government, of a society, and markets are embedded inside of the government and the society. And we create certain terms. We allocate certain kinds of property rights to goods. Now, what do I mean by property rights? Again, we have a tendency to view property rights as something that's natural. If your parents own a home, I used to own a home, I don't own one right now. I had a piece of paper, right? That was my title. That gave me the right to own that property. Well, what is a title to a piece of land? It's like a license. Well, what can I do with it? Actually, what I can do with it is I can take it to the courts and enforce my rights against another person who, say, is trespassing on my land or building something next door to my land that's harming me. So actually, that means property rights require courts, right? And if we think deeply about property rights, we see that property rights are often created by long-term governmental processes. And just to give you a quick example that I think will be familiar to most of you, think about land in Texas, right? We're a strong property rights state. Well, what does it mean that I own land? Did I make the land? Well, no, I bought the land from someone, right? And where did they get the land from? Well, we all know that several hundred years ago, there were native peoples living all over Texas, and no people of European ancestry, right? And then there was a government, the Spanish government tried to come in and create these ranches, and they had a lot of problems with the native people. They were never able to establish a secure population. In fact, most of Texas was controlled first by the Apaches and later by the Comanches. But neither of those people were originally from here. We know the Apaches came from much farther north and migrated south, maybe couple thousand years ago. And the Comanches came much more recently, only after the arrival of horses in the plains 300 years ago. And then eventually Texas became a republic, right? You all know the Texas Revolution. And eventually, with the help of the US government, which was much more powerful in that region, able to exert more control in that region, they were eventually able to drive the Comanches out. So then how'd you get your property rights? Well, you stole it from the Comanches, and you stole it from the Spanish, and you stole it from the Mexicans. But now we've established this system that, no Comanche is going to come and say, this used to be my land. If they came, you'd say, well, show me your title. We'll go to the title company. So that's how we get markets. We get markets because the government establishes these rights. Because we as a society, the government is a representation of the collective, create them. So in the next lecture, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what some of these limitations of the markets are.